presentation number 5, the final one, I believe, Roger Taylor. Um, we often take for granted that our lives have meaning. We might assume that being a good person and helping others makes our life meaningful. Making a positive impact on the world, isn't that the meaning of life? Um, Not necessarily. The ripple effects, our positive acts over a time will fade. Most of our accomplishments won't last. The reality is we do a bunch of stuff in life and die. We leave our possessions and projections and projects to the next generation. They pick them up and repeat the cycle. It's easy to begin thinking lives without meaning. In fact, Richard Taylor thinks looking at a meaningless life can shed light on what gives life meaning. You'll see how he does this in his book, Meaning of Life, or The Meaningless Existence. In doing this, he arrives at the thesis that the meaning of life is purely subjective. Life is a meaning based on the perspective of the subject of the life. If the subject is rightly orientated desires, which for Taylor focuses on the process of doing things, not the products or achievement of doing things. They take pleasure in doing things, doing good things just to do them, not just to get something in return, anything like that. And life for them has meaning for that person, for that specific reason, and that's all the meaning that is to someone's life who's like that. It comes wholly from within us, from within them. Taylor thinks that the myth of Sisyphus illustrates a meaningless existence. Unlike Albert Camus, who we talked about in essay presentation number 4, I believe, Taylor isn't in the business of reinterpreting the original myth. If a meaningless existence involves endless, pointless activity, an existence full of activity that never accumulates in anything. Yes, there's no reason to it. The end game is pointless, basically. The person's existence is like a broken record that just keeps repeating the same small phrase over and over again. Sisyphus committed transgressions against the gods, then condemned into an eternity of difficult, pointless labor. He must repeatedly roll a heavy stone up a hill, only to have it never reach the top. It tumbles back down to the bottom. He starts hoisting the heavy stone again. Now, perhaps Sisyphus' life is meaningless because his life is full of physical pain and suffering. This is the natural thought. Taylor thinks that this doesn't work at all. He asks us to reconsider something like a relay race, but it's not really a race. There are no rules. There's no way to win. Imagine one person carries a tiny rock to a point. Another person picks it up. That person carries it to a different point. The original person returns the pebble to the original point. The cycle starts again and repeats endlessly. There's no physical suffering in this endless pebble relay. Yet, for Taylor, this was the sum of the existence of the two people. Their lives would be meaningless. The key of meaninglessness is the presence of endless cycles that never go anywhere. Each churn feeds back into the cycle of renewed labor of some kind, as if people are hamsters on a wheel endlessly spinning but going nowhere. The original Sisyphus case involves endless activity that just feeds into more of the same activity. This raises important questions. How might our lives differ from the life of Sisyphus? How might our lives have meaning in his lives? Are our lives similarly meaningless? Well, our meaning might come from creating beautiful and lasting things. We often do this through art, architecture, and technology. Sisyphus doesn't create any lasting beauty. Taylor points out that if Sisyphus hoisted stones to the top of the hill and created a beautiful and lasting temple, then his activity would no longer be pointless. It would amount to something. Do our lives resemble the original Sisyphus case or the temple building Sisyphus case? Taylor argues that creaturely, life resembles the original Sisyphus case. Taylor notes that life in general is endlessly cynical. Its activity feeds into a life cycle. That perpetuate life, which ends up in new life, that repeats the same old cycle. But what it all boils down to is that if you find meaning in what you're doing, if it lasts to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones, then ultimately it has meaning no matter what it is. And that's the moral of his story, even if he does seem cynical when it comes to that. But that will conclude my presentation. Thank you for listening.